comment on it. And Yaakov.
What? Give me 1 second. I want to hear. So it's like first we're on Sanhedrin Aleph Amid Aleph 91a, and yesterday we had a Gemara, which we pointed out a bunch of interesting parts to it, but didn't come to any conclusion. And the Gemara was someone who challenged and said that those that live die, those that die don't come back to life. And then the response was three things really. Number one, a parable of a king who asks to build a building where there's no water or earth. They build it, it falls apart. And then when he asks them to build it again with earth and water, they don't build it, and he gets angry at them. Parable one. And number two was this rodent that's half earth, half flesh, and then morphs into fully flesh rodent. And the counterclaim is that it takes too long for this thing to morph. And then their response was this chilazon, this snail or this amphibious creature which lives on the mountains, that spontaneously, with rain, from one becomes many. Right? Okay. And we asked a bunch of questions on it, and we didn't have much of a... Just kind of opened the floor to it. So you said you had something on that, yeah? You wanted to share something?
All I can say, just what I see from the commentary, just literal. You want to give examples in the natural world. You see things in the natural world that give a hint of it.
Right.
The rodent is the closest one. Apparently from the earth it comes out life.
Morphs into...
Yeah, and from the chilazon you can see, as of course Rashi mentioned, they're really eggs, not really, so it happens very quickly. That's one, two aspects. One from the earth to life, and one it goes quickly.
Yeah.
So I agree. There's much more to be said, but the commentaries I checked didn't have much.
So I've been thinking about it, and I don't have every detail yet fully fleshed out, but this is where I'm thinking. These the heretics here, or the heretic here who challenges Tchis HaMesim doesn't just say in the previous, in other challenges they just asked, how do you know that's going to happen? Here the person is making a logical claim as to why it shouldn't happen. He's pointing to the nature of reality. The nature of reality is that things slowly die, not the reverse. It's the nature of things. We look around the world, we observe a world that's alive, and we see it slowly dissipate. So this reversal business is not something I'm buying into. With things that go from death to life. That's basically the argument. Sorry?
Although, it's not like a super parallel, every winter there's this kind of a
rebirth
of leaves and flowers, and they seemingly are,
And then there's a rebirth.
Dead, and then there's a rebirth of...
Right. Yeah, it's
of course, the roots
point.
are alive. I understand everything.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's a regeneration of what seemingly is now dead.
Right.
Comes to life. Living in this climate, we certainly know that.
Right. So I guess, but that's true of the everything that's inanimate and things that grow. Not when it comes to things that are alive. Like animals and humans don't have that rebirth nature, which is interesting in and of itself. That the world of growth, the world of plantation, does revive itself once a year, which is interesting. But whereas human
hibernation, not really, because
hibernation, kind of with the polar bears.
Is there still, yeah.
Yeah. At any rate, here's what I'm thinking. They're challenging by saying that we observe the natural order in which things slowly die, as opposed to the reverse. And so he's the first one not to respond with a verse to prove his point. Right? The other people who argued, they accepted the fact of God's creation, and therefore they said, how do you know? And they quoted verses. Or they asked details about it. Did it come with clothing, without clothing? And they quoted verses or something like that. Or actually parables. But the premise of the question was they believe in the notion of God. But it's possible that the questioners here don't believe in the notion of God. And they're saying, look, observe the natural world, it doesn't return, it slowly dies. Well, let's say for flesh, for human.
It's dust. That's why trees wouldn't be a good example. Talking about can you create life from dust? I mean, that
right. Whereas the trees don't completely rot. Whereas humans completely decompose. Let's use a nicer word.
It's animals versus the plant, and also it's regeneration from
decomposing
animate material. See,
from something
the roots are still there.
Something that completely decomposes. Yeah.
That's the question.
But a seed rots, basically. They fresh seed will first
Will rot, that's correct.
rot,
Yeah.
seemingly then.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an example for us. Like
Maybe
you
that's-
think you're
That's actually Chassidus uses that as an example for
Yeah,
avodah.
the
rotting of the
tshuva,
thing.
and you could be like spiritual death.
The Gemara used it before for the fact that you come back in clothing.
Yeah,
But
that's
it doesn't talk about the rotting of
No,
it.
but we can.
You can add it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm suggesting perhaps as follows. So, in response, who's Rabbi Chia? Rabbi Ami, who doesn't respond with the verse, doesn't cite to you can't cite to authority text if the other person doesn't accept the authority text, meaning the verse. So he uses a parable. And I'll tell you how I got to this. In the parable, he says, "This is the parable. There's a king who tells his ministers, go build for me a city in a place where there's no earth or water. They build it, it collapses. He comes to them and said, he comes to them again and says, build a city in a place where there is water and earth. And they say, we're not doing it. And he says, he gets angry. What's the analog? Who are the ministers that the king is informing? Okay, so the king is God, fine, but who are the ministers in this analog? Who is God instructing to build this building? This is what made me start thinking, who's God talking to? So perhaps he's using their logic, right? So they are accepting that there's a certain system to nature, and this notion of nature reversing itself, they don't buy. So the first thing he does in his rebuttal is that nature in itself has a commander. Right? We're the origins of nature. So I'll grant it to you that there are forces of nature that God sets up a system. Fine. But it started at some point. That's what Rashi says. At the beginning it was something from nothing. Right? Rashi said that creation is something from nothing, whereas resurrection is something from an already something. Hinting to this idea that his rebuttal is, I'll grant you that nature has a certain system, but nature has a commander. Nature started at one point. And when nature started, it started from nothing. So God commands nature, so to speak, the forces of nature that you accept exist, build a world. And you're okay with that. They built the world. But then when God says rebuild the world in some new fashion, now you're saying that nature says, no, we can't do it because this is what our system always was, that we die and not rebirth. And there the king's getting angry. In other words, he's making this parable to show that it falls on its face. If nature's nature began at somewhere, and wherever it started, if it started at that point successfully, then it could start at some other point also successfully by the same commander. And that's the first point in his argument, perhaps.
At the beginning of the story, wasn't he commanded where there was no water and no earth?
Right, creation started from nowhere.
Right.
The rules of nature started at some point, right? There was no water, no earth, nothing to work with.
But wasn't there something it didn't?
It says that it fell.
It fell.
They built it and it fell. In other words, yeah. So perhaps, in other words, God said he instructed nature to make something, and he made the nature in such a fashion that it slowly dissipates. So it did. But now he's telling them to create.
When did it dissipate?
No, using their logic, as in humans die. Nature built humans, and the humans died.
Okay.
Right? But they started from. But this nature started from somewhere. This creation of humans started from somewhere.
But even Adam, there wasn't nothing. It was from the earth. Yeah.
Right, but he doesn't, and that's another thing. Why doesn't he cite that?
Yeah.
That's why I think he's using their logic. In other words, even if we'll accept your logic that nature is built in a certain way, that's true. But nature started from somewhere. And when did that nature start? When did the nature start that things that live slowly die? When?
But the Greeks actually believe that the world is always here, and they believe that things that die don't come back either. So there's things that. Because the Greeks believe the world is always here. There was never a creation of creation.
I don't know if he's a Greek though.
Yeah, but
Ami is later. He's not
yeah,
in Greek time.
The Greek philosophy was very strong for the philosophers.
This is in Rav Ami is already in Babylonia. It's closer probably to Roman.
Yeah, but the Romans didn't have their own philosophy. They adopted the ones from the Greeks.
Right.
The world's always here.
Anyway, I'm just suggesting.
But the thing is also, it says, it's interesting, it says, V'yata mami. You don't
Sorry?
believe in this. It's in the proof of the earth and the water.
Oh, so that's
believe.
That's right. That's
the
right.
other one didn't say believe. It
Oh,
says,
that's what I'm saying. So now comes second argument. Now, even if you're not going to accept that nature has a commander,
yeah, at least look
in
at
other
the
words,
natural world itself.
there exactly, and that's where I was going.
Mom,
So the first thing he tells them is that you're acknowledging nature as a certain system. Now, it must have started from somewhere. So it started at one point, it got that nature, and then the same one who commands it to have this nature now commands it under new circumstances that are actually more accessible to nature because there's a world that already exists to behave a certain way, and now nature says, no, we can't because this was our nature always. That's what you are saying. Ami says to this heretic. You're basically saying that nature has to deny its commander who began it to begin with. Now, even if you don't believe that nature has a commander, look at the natural world itself. This commander, by fact of observation, has created nature with such tweaks that they themselves can regenerate life. And that's where the second comes in. Perhaps.
I kind of wish you would use Noah as an example here.
Right, but then he'd be citing the proof text.
I created nature. I destroyed it.
Right.
And then they may have said, we can't do this again. He said,
yes, you
am
can.
I a commander or not?
Right.
I'm doing it again.
He doesn't want to cite the proof text because they don't believe it. Right. We like we said yesterday when you argue with the people who talk about Eretz Yisrael, you have to argue in their terms. So he does not cite a proof text because they don't believe in it. It's not going to help them. So if he tries to use their logic, even if you don't want to accept the fact that there's a commander to nature itself has these systems embedded in it. Something like that. I still haven't figured out exactly.
In the beginning, we say the Zohar, Shvirat HaKelim.
It's true.
Big Bang.
He wouldn't accept this argument.
But the other thing is, the only thing I haven't fully developed yet is how this would lead to the two stages in the second response, which is first the rodent that's half flesh, half earth, and then the other one that's the snails that spontaneously arrive from eggs. So I guess that's where we come to your point. In these two types of nature, in these two elements of nature that already exist, one that takes time to go from earth to flesh, and one that's spontaneous but doesn't come exactly from earth.
You combine the two.
You have both of them. That's.
But anyway, this
And the one thing that still I want to cover that I still haven't got yet is why the first one's in the valley and the second one's in the hill. There's something about this. The rodent is in the valley. Go to the valley. If you don't believe me, go to the valley and you'll see this rodent that's half. And if you don't, and then he continues and go to the. What does he say between the two?
I go to the mountain, exactly. One is the Bika, one's the mountain.
Shema Temer, perhaps to say it takes too long to evolve, then go to the mountain. I still want to. For some reason, this comment where he says go to the valley and then go to the mountain is pushing me in the direction of thinking that there's a mystical level here, and I don't know what it is yet, but. On the simple face of the story, like who cares if it's in the valley or the mountain, or if it's in a plain, or if it's next door, like what's the difference? There's something here that he's telling them when he tells them, go to the valley and you'll see the rodent that's half flesh, half earth, and then go to the mountain. So even though I'm giving this little thing, I'm still not complete. I haven't fully closed the circle on this Gemara yet.
Valleys, mountains, they mean a lot. Think of Shavuos.
Right, something about humility, something about gaiva, something. There's something. There's some message here that I'm not fully.
Because you can see the achbar is only halachic status is only for tumas
Yeah.
sheretz. Well, the chalazon, of course, is obviously
For a mitzvah.
A mitzvah, of course, of tzitzis, and also
True.
for big lekuna. So he's probably showing them that.
From the physical world, from the spiritual world, from a higher place, from a lower place.
It's not like this proof. The other proof that the achbar I agree is the closest to tchias amesim in terms of from the earth, but it's only a question of tumas.
That's on the basic level.
Right, but here he wants to get one level above that. He wants to show you that if you don't like that.
Unless it gets back to the previous. Unless it gets back to the previous conversation we had before about the reconstruction of the old body, retaining its original tumah, or it's an entirely new body like the snail.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe there's something there.
And also the idea of mitzvahs, because that's the point. He's missing tchias amesim.
But if we want to interpret the Gemara in that way, we have to interpret the question and the first half of the Gemara also in that way. It has to be consistency.
No, he's giving him a double entendre answer. First
I know, but I want to see the whole Gemara on two planes. In other words, I want to see the whole Gemara on one level and then the whole Gemara on a deeper mystical level.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see. But
it seems like Rashi, in the sense, the first part exactly. If you don't believe Hashem creates from the earth, like the first one is made. Hashem's powers limited, like idolaters believe. They had certain power, but couldn't. So that's the first argument. And if you don't want the Hashem in the argument, I'll give you a secular argument from science itself. He's giving us three different arguments.
But even his argument about God is not an argument to proof text. It's a logical one.
The logical one.
It's a logical one. But if you don't accept the logic of that,
you don't believe in a divine force, then let's look at nature.
Right, that's what I see in this Gemara.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And then, but he wants to end off a kind of a hint, especially for Jews, that the chalazon is a remez that from something tameh comes.
I'd like to see the whole thing in the remez. But anyway, okay. That's what I have so far in that Gemara. But maybe more will come to us. The second thing I wanted to share about yesterday's Gemara was that the Gemara gives a date. So the next story we began at least, was the story of Gvia ben Pesisa, this hunchback fellow, who is clearly witty and knowledgeable, even though he wasn't classified as a technical sage.
Love to front with that guy.
Right?
Very humble too, very humble.
Very humble.
Ooh.
Very humble.
But
Who says,
very sharp.
Choose me if I lose, then it's blame me for it, and if I win, I won't take the credit. And So the Gemara gave the date here as 24th of Nisan. Now, as the Gemara itself mentions, the story comes from Megillas Tainus. And I mentioned yesterday, Megillas Tainus is a book which predates the Mishnah by some decades, maybe even more, which it's a kind of calendar that lists dates and events throughout Jewish history, and it was used during the time of the temple as to inform people of when they're allowed to fast, when they're not allowed to fast.
First Hayom Yom.
The first Hayom Yom, exactly. Now, most of the dates, as we mentioned, have been Nizbatel, were nullified once the destruction of the temple came around. Now, there, Megillas Tainus, they give the date for, printed the wrong page here, the 25th of Sivan, the month of Sivan. Now, I found this. There's a fellow, Rabbi Zelikson, who...
27 of Sivan.
Sorry?
I born 27 of Sivan.
Very nice.
2 days later.
Or maybe, was it 25th? Maybe 28th of Sivan.
Coming right up.
I put the wrong page. I think it's 28th, right?
No, he has over here different guys. He has 25 in Nisan, 20 in Nisan.
It's 20. No,
And 25 of Sivan.
it's Sivan. 28, 25 of Sivan, 28 of Sivan.
25 of Sivan.
25 of Sivan.
But he has other gears here, 25 of Nisan, 28 of Nisan.
At any rate, there's a commentary on this Megillah Tainus called the Taisus Chadashim, and there he makes the point very strongly that it seems like the Gemara, our Gemara, has a version that's not 100% accurate, based on a Medrash and Tanchuma, and based on the fact that in Megillah Tainus, each month is a chapter, and it would be very unlikely that in the Megillah Tainus, it's more likely that the person in the Gemara made a small mistake on the lettering, Chaf He versus Chaf Ches, or Nisan versus Sivan, rather than the author of the Megillah Tainus put it in a completely different wrong chapter. So it would seem that the correct date is Sivan, and which means the date is coming up. And secondly, the way the Gemara's story here is written, it seems like each of the conversations he had, first with the Canaanites, which we read yesterday, and then today we'll read the other stories with the Ishmaelim and the Egyptians. The way the Gemara frames it here, it seems like the story happened on 3 different occasions. The Gemara says Shum Pamachas, another time. Whereas here, it seems like it was all in one day. And the Taisus Chadashim, which is a commentary on the Megillah Tainus, proves from the context that it must have all been in one day.
Yeah, also the Gra makes the correction.
The girl takes it from here.
Yeah, takes it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not just Shem. But it shows you that the lesson is very good. A politician has to be sharp, not the greatest scholar, but sharp enough to answer according to their own logic.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, so let's continue with that story then. We are Shupa Machas. You'll see a big aleph inside of square brackets. 5 lines from the end of the line. Last word on the line is Banai, Bo B'nai, and then go back Shuv Pamachas. Okay, so the previous story was that the Canaanites the Africans came and claimed land, laid claim to the land of Israel before Alexander of Macedon, Alexander the Great, and they said, citing from the verse, that the verse refers to Canaan and all its borders, and this fellow Gviya Besisa goes and argues and says that the verse says, "Cursed is Canaan, who is slave to slaves," referring to a reference to Noach speaking to his children after the flood and the sin that Cham performs then, and therefore Gviya Besisa says, not only is the land ours, but you belong to us too. And then they left. How was that?
Yeah, they had a chance for rebuttal. They couldn't give an argument.
They asked for 3 days.
3 days, yeah.
So similar story. Shupa Machas, another occasion. As again I mentioned, the Taisus Chadashim makes the point that it was actually the same day, and our version of the Gemara should be somewhat edited. I think that's in the parentheses here, right? The Aleph, where does that go to?
The Gra.
Nimchak, yeah, the Gra. Okay. So Bo B'nai Mitzrayim, the Egyptians arrived, Ladan and Yisrael, to lay a claim to the Jewish people. Lefnei Alexander Melchton, before Alexander of Macedon, Alexander the Great. Amru Loi, they said to him, the Egyptians said, the verse says, Hashem nasan eschenu am bein Mitzrayim, and God gave the grace of the people in the land of Egypt. This is talking about, it's in Shmois, that's when Hashem nasan eschenu am bein Mitzrayim.
Yeah, they got the gifts and so on.
Yeah.
They took the gifts. And you get
this is when the Jews left Eretz Yisrael, left Mitzrayim, and they borrowed. And Hashem gave the grace of the people in the eyes of Egyptians. And they borrowed they borrowed the stuff.
Silver and gold.
They borrowed silver and gold from the Egyptians, left Egypt, and never paid it back. So says the Egyptians to Alexander of Macedon, give us the gold and silver you took from us. You borrowed gold and silver, give it back to us. And I suppose they're asking for it in the form of land, not necessarily. Give us back the gold and silver. Okay? So Gvim ben Pesisa, the same fellow from yesterday, told the sages, allow me please, and I will go over Adonimon, and I will counter-argue with them. Lefnei Alexander, before, in the presence of Alexander the Great, Alexanderus. If they shall win me in argument, Amru, they will say, you can say to them, you won a simpleton, because Gvim Pesisa wasn't technically a sage. So if I lose, lay the blame on me. I'm a simpleton. I'm not so smart. It's fine. You lost. And then you can go make your own arguments. But if I do win, or if I win this argument, you can tell them that Torah voiced and articulated by Gvim Pesisa, but Torah is what won you, and therefore I don't have to take the credit for the winning. This is humility we were talking about yesterday, and putting Gvim Pesisa so that he can take the fall, but if he's successful, he doesn't take the credit. So the sages gave Gvim Pesisa permission, and he went V'danimon, and he argued and went into this judgment, into this court case with Alexander. So Gvim Pesisa told them, the Egyptians, where are you bringing your proof? Again, we're making the point like we did yesterday, and we alluded to that today again, that he argues them on their terms. If you don't, then you're talking at each other, not to each other. You want to have a conversation, you first need to understand the other person's position.
There's no dialogue.
There's no dialogue if you just argue your position. You first have to be able to articulate the other person's position.
Also for law, you have to have the same frame of reference. If you have
Everything.
different laws, you can't argue.
It's in every conversation.
Yeah.
What's the encyclopedia of references here?
Yeah, it's in every conversation. It's a good way in general, especially if you're in mediation, in anything, between parents, between children, between spouses. The first, exercise, make each person articulate the other person's opinion. Just see if you understand it. Just articulate the other person's opinion, then you can cite yours. So it's a kind of similar thing. He's asking them, what's your position? And then we'll talk to you on your terms. So he says, where are you bringing your proof? Amrullah, they said to him, in a Torah, we're quoting Torah. Amrullah, he said, okay. So if you're going with Torah, then I'm not going to bring you a proof in anything but Torah. So I'm going to stick on your terms. So remember the verse reads, the time that the Jews settled in Egypt, Shloshim Shana V'Arba Shana, was 430 years. That's how long we've been living in your country. And you want us to pay you back because we borrowed gold and silver before we left and never paid you. Fine. We'll do that. But first give us the wages of 600,000 which you enslaved in Egypt. Shloshim Shana V'Arba Shana, for 430 years. No problem. Pay us for the time we were slaves, and then we'll give you back the money that we borrowed.
Yeah, we weren't slaves for 30 years.
It's also a good question. It's only 210 years.
I saw a very good deal on this with numerology.
Mm-hmm.
If you say Chamushim left Mitzrayim, they were slave for 86 years, the 10th slavery.
But it's 5 times that because only
430.
86
times 5.
Because the 600,000 is only the amount who left, not the amount who were actually there. Was actually more. It's good. Well, very good.
86 times 5 exactly is 430.
Really?
Yeah. 86 times 5 is 430.
Yeah.
That's very, very good.
I saw it's one of the comments.
How did you get that again?
So that's very good. So they're claiming, he's saying that we need money for 600,000 for 430 years. But there were only 210 years they were in Egypt.
Exactly.
Right? But the verse says that only a fifth left Egypt. So the 600,000 number is not the number of people who were enslaved, it's the number of people who left. And that's only a fifth. So times 600,000 by 5.
That's right.
How many do you have? That's how many Jews were there. 605.
3 million.
3 million, exactly.
Right. Now you have to do 3 million by
86.
You have to do 3 million by 210 years.
No,
Or another way of doing the math.
86.
Another way of doing the math is
With 10 slavery, 86 years.
86 years of intense slavery. 210 years is how many years they lived there.
Exactly.
That's
Remember,
correct.
the first
Right, because
part
they weren't slaves the first parts, right?
Exactly.
So 86. You have to do basically 86 years
Times 5.
times 5,
430.
because that's 600,000 times 5. So 86 years times 5, giving each person 5 years, because there's 5 times the amount.
Yeah. It's 430.
It's 430 years.
Exactly.
So it's 430 years of labor divided over
for
86 years
Yeah.
by 600,000 people, 600,000 people times 5.
I find, yeah. That's a chaf. I thought that was a very good commentary. I saw that.
That's very good. Would you read that?
I think it's in the Ein Yaakov.
It's in the Ein Yaakov. Very good.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that. That's very good.
It's a good numerology.
You use the Gvuha and 5 level of
Okay.
Yeah.
So he says.
That way too.
Nefesh.
So Viva Basisa said, you're citing the Torah, I cite the Torah, you owe us 430 years of slave labor. Amar Lahen Alexanderus Boikton. So Alexander of Macedon the Great told the Egyptians, Hichziru lehem tshuva, respond to them. Amru Loi, the Egyptians said, Tinu lanu zman shleisha yom, give us 3 days, we want to reconsider our argument. Nosim lahem zman, Alexander gave them 3 days. Batku, they did some research, v'lematzu tshuva, they could not find a good response. Miyad, immediately, they ran off, leaving behind their fields. That's why I think that when they were asking for payment of the borrowing, they were saying, pay us back in the form of land. And so they left, leaving their land behind, Kishen Zeruis, while their land is already planted, V'karmeim, Kishen Tuis, and they left their vineyards, while the vineyards were already planted, Baruchu, and they left. V'Isashana that year, especially if we're taking the version that's actually the same day, then obviously that year was Shvius, was the 7th year, Shemitah, which ordinarily, had the Jews got the land then, they would not be able to work it and basically left starving. But because the Egyptians ran off, leaving their fields behind, they had plenty to eat. Okay, and we'll conclude with the next story as well, which is a similar story, this time with the Ishmaelites. Shupamachas. On another occasion, or again the same day, Bo b'nei Yishmael, the children of Yishmael, b'nei Keturah, and the children of Keturah, Ladun and Yisrael, to argue with the Jewish people of Alexander's Mokdan, before, in the presence of Alexander of Macedon. So it's one day, first the Africans, Egyptians, and now the Ishmaelites. Amrloi, and they say, the Ishmaelites say, Eretz Canaan Shalanu, Vishalachem. Eretz Canaan, the land of Israel, belongs to both of us equally. Why? The verse reads, Ishmael ben Avram. It says, this is the prodigy of Avram. This is the prodigy of Shmuel, son of Avram. The Ksivin says, El Tolos Yitzchak ben Avram. This is the prodigy of Yitzchak, son of Avram. So we are both equally children of Abraham. God promised Abraham the land of Israel. Give it to both of us. Same story.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Gvi b'pesisa says to the Chachamim, Tinu l'reshus, Allah, give me permission, and I will go and argue with them. Lefnei Alexander of Maikron, in the presence of Alexander of Macedon. And again, he says the same thing. If they win me Amru, you guys can defend it and say, a simple Timnim Gevia won you. In other words, I'll take the blame if I lose. If I win, if I outsmart them, I won't take the credit. Amrulahem, you can tell them, the Torah is what won. This is the same dialogue as before with the Egyptians, and before that with the Africans. The sages gave permission to give him Besisa. Halach, he went V'danimon, and he argued with the Yishmaelim. Amrulahem, he tells them, hey, again, asking for their terms. Where are you bringing your proof? What's your proof text that we should split the land? And they said, Amrullah, the Arab, the Yishmaelim said, Torah would bring proof from Torah. Amrulahan, so Ravia says, I'm going to bring a proof from Torah too. Shenema, and the verse says, quote, Hayitin Avram es kol shaloi li Yitzchak. Avram gives Yitzchak everything he owned. And to the children of his concubines, which is Yishmael, Ashel Avram, which belonged to Avram. He had more than just Yishmael, but from the Yishmael and the brothers that came not from Sarah, but from Hagar, from the other concubines that Avram had. Nasan Avram Matanis. Avram gave him gifts, not everything, specific gifts. So Gavim Pesisa argues, Avshan Nasan Agitin, a father that gives his children gifts, which Avram gives them gifts and sends them off. Labanov b'chayav, in his life. V'shigar Vishigazen, Malzen, sent this guy away from him. So a father takes a bunch of children, says, here's a gift for each of you, now leave. That's what Avram did to Yishmael. Klum yesh lezeh al zeh klum. Can that child who got a gift and was sent away after the father's death come back to the other brother and say, you owe me half the inheritance? Clearly not. So that was the end of the argument, which is interesting because at this point the Arabs don't ask for 3 days, like the Egyptians asked for 3 days and like the Africans asked for 3 days. Ends the conversation here. Question number one. Question number two is,
here they got something.
No, right? No.
In two cases, they got nothing.
They got a gift, first of all, but also no. There's another verse which says more explicitly that Avram gave everything to Yitzchak.
Yeah.
Not this verse. I guess it's Hashem speaking. Hashem said that your son's gonna inherit you, but they want to. Gavim Basis is giving the proof that Avram did, which is why he's not quoting the verse about God speaking, because God does say clearly, that Yitzchak will be your child, but Yishmael might say, well, maybe Avram rejected God's command and therefore belongs half to us. So he's bringing the proof that Avram himself, in his lifetime, gave Yishmael a gift and said, leave. And they don't ask for 3 days, which is interesting, something to think about. Anyway, the Gemara concludes, and we'll leave with that. My matanas. What's the gift that Yishmael gave, that Avram gave Yishmael in his lifetime? Not the blessings, because there's other blessings. Mm-hmm. But what's the gift? Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says, listen to this. Malamed, this tells you, Shemasalim Shem Tuma, that Avram gave Yishmael the powers of impurity, witchcraft. Yishmael was given by Avram the capacity to manipulate negative forces, negative spiritual forces, to their benefit. So there's clearly layers and layers to the story. But this ends the story with Gavim Pesisa, our simpleton, hunchback, witty hero who takes the lead when the Jews are in trouble, goes forward without being a scholar, with humility. And there's a lot to learn from Gavim Pesisa, and God willing, another story tomorrow, another conversation, and this gives us the nature of humanity. Tomorrow's story, and then which leads to the nature of the resurrection. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.